Good morning. After a bit of technical difficulties, and I know we had a meeting this morning where we had a few of our teachers that were planning on being here. They couldn't because they had to be in a parent meeting, but we'll get started anyway. We're going to look at a diversity plan, which really what that's going to do is look at different subgroups of our students and see how we can help them. Some of them have been struggling a little bit more than our big student population, so we're going to look at some different parts, see how we can help these students. And before we get into that, we'll look at some definitions of diversity so that we can better understand what that means and how that's going to apply to helping our students. These other definitions are from people in my classes. The first one says diversity is promoting different perspectives and backgrounds to ensure a well-rounded product. So he focused on an end game. So there's an end product that needs to happen as far as diversity is going to end up being a goal. And another student said the combination of cultural, ethnic, and social, etc. similarities and differences in people. So they focused more on all the different types of people. And so I kind of did both in my definition. The inclusion of people with various differences for a common purpose. And so all different types of people all working together for a common good. And so those were our definitions. There were some definitions from some other places as well. The University of Maryland defined diversity as being otherness, and they focused on that. Or those human qualities that are different from your own and outside of the groups to which you belong, yet are present in other individuals and groups. So basically, don't belong to you, but they do belong to other people, those differences. The Santa Fe Office of Diversity says that diversity is understanding and respecting differences, acknowledging similarities, broadening our horizons, embracing and enhancing cultural literacy. So they focused on what you do with it. Like, they're focused on verbs. So you're acknowledging, you're broadening, you're embracing. And so give you a little bit better understanding about what diversity is. And then the textbook that we use and some other readings we did. So the academic diversity has a lot to do with poor students tend to come to school significantly behind their more affluent peers. And that certainly starts all the way in pre-K, goes all the way up to our level and beyond, that they are behind when we get there. It's our job to do the best we can to catch them up. Cultural diversity would be, with some of these students, their parenting styles among the poor and affluent families tend to differ greatly, leading to different expectations regarding schooling. So what the expectation of, say my kid versus another kid could be quite different based on how much money we have. And the final one, socioeconomic diversity. Some schools are actively looking for a mix of students with different financial background as part of their school design. Now, ours is pretty mixed naturally, but a lot of the readings that we've been doing have been saying how the schools are more effective when they do get a wide variety of students. And it helps everybody in general, not just the top tier students and not just the lower tier students or the rich or the poor. It helps everybody. Excuse me, the computer's being a little bit slow this morning. All right, these are a little bit of data about our school. We are around 610 total students, with about 75% of them being white Caucasians, 90% being African Americans, and then just under 6% of other descent. And we have 45% of our students on free and reduced lunch, which actually is below the state average. All right, so some of the facts about our testing looks like this. There are not enough 8th grade Hispanic or Asian students. I looked at 8th grade only over the last 3 years. And there are not enough 8th grade Hispanic or Asian students to have testing data. Females were stronger in both math and reading during those 3 years, which it was surprising to me that it was both. From reading research, I felt that reading would be that way, but it was surprising to me that it was both. The largest gap in reading and math score subgroups comes between black and white students. There's not a big discrepancy in scores between the free lunch and reduced lunch subgroups, so being poor was being poor as far as the groups were put together. Free lunch students didn't do any worse or better than reduced lunch. You know, they were kind of on the same track. Special education groups had significant reading score improvement even as the test changed and apparently got harder according to the rest of our students. I think this is linked to an increased emphasis in the school that we've been working on for years ever since. That was our subgroup that we struggled with back when we were doing the ARM testing and had to make some accommodations for that. Special education groups had score drops in math. We're going to look at the different scores quickly, and we'll talk about that. This is our 8th grade reading scores, and with our black versus our white students, you can see from the 2012 and 2013 ARMS, and then finally at the end, the 2014 Aspire. And you'll notice a dip in all these scores with the 2014 Aspire because the test was completely different. It was our first time taking it, a lot of different variables there, but you can see that the black is our all students, and so those are in around the middle 80s for the ARMS. But then our white students as a whole kind of were above that mark, but our black students struggled. So they were around 70%, whereas the white students almost approached 90%. And so what we have to do here is look beyond that stat and figure out what it is that we can do to help those students, because that subgroup is not acceptable. And then finally, in that ACT Aspire, they did much more poorly than our white students did. So we've got, and that's roughly 72%. And that's saying that they were on grade level, had achieved the academic standard. That's either a 3 or a 4 on the ARMS, or achieving the academic standard on the ACT Aspire. All right, our 8th grade reading for free lunch and reduced lunch. You can see that those are relatively close to our all student average. So they are below those. So we know from reading and from the literature that we've seen that, like we said, our poor students come to school disadvantaged, and so we've got to find a way to make up that gap as they go along. But again, our averages on the ARM were around 82% for all students, and these were all of these were above 75, and the reduced lunch were even above 80% on the reading. So, and even on the ACT Aspire, there wasn't as significant of a drop, but there was a drop based on poverty level. Here's our 8th grade reading, males versus females. You can see the blue line above on each level. Girls did better than boys, and so we need to look at ways that we can improve that, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But overall, our girls did significantly better than our boys. And then here's our special education students versus all students, and you can understand why. Okay, these are students that need extra help, and that we try to provide that for them. But the thing that I thought was funny is you can see the all students going down, but then at the end, even on the ACT Aspire, we had more students that were successful, more of our special education students. So we got to even figure out why we're improving. And I think that's a lot because we've added that extra reading class for those students, and so they're getting extra help. All right, then quickly, the math scores were kind of in a similar grade as the reading scores were. This is our black students versus our white students. Actually much closer on the ARMS than the reading scores were. And so that's a good news look there, because they're well above around 75% in math scores being able to get to the academic content standard. And then, but the ACT Aspire, looks like we all struggled in general in math, but our black students even more so, only 8.3% of those met the standard. And so we knew that standard would be different, and we knew that those scores were not going to be like we wanted them to be, but that's a significantly low number, so we got to figure something out about that. And free and reduced lunch, you can see those scores are pretty much the same as what we expected from the reading as well. So they're pretty close, but they are lower to our all-student average, and especially as you get to the ACT Aspire in 2014, the reduced lunch number again was around 8%, and so that's pretty low compared to the all-student average of 40%, meeting the standard. males versus females, this is a little bit closer than the reading scores were, but in there on the ACT Aspire, you can tell that males did better than the females did during that year. However, before the females were doing better. That kind of balanced out and was a little bit closer and about like what we'd expect from a reading as far as males in the math and sciences versus females. And but I believe that trend is changing a little bit. And then finally, our special ed students, we didn't have a single, I know the ACT Aspire was much harder, and we talked about that. We didn't have a single student in our special ed group subgroup last year that met the academic content standards. So in math, that's something we've got to work on. And obviously, they struggled in the past as well, but specifically on that test. So how do we fix that? Okay, and these are some suggestions that they've got for males. We said that males did not do as well as females did in reading. So here's some suggestions that we got from some of the literature that we've read that will provide book talks for students to get their engagement level increased as far as reading and being here in the library. It's something that I could start. Just trying to find books that they'll enjoy and present them in a way that they'll get excited about them. We can also provide magazines, comics, and graphic novels because by reading those, they're able to gain and garner understanding between text, and it's even through those type of text. So these non-traditional formats can still help our male students, and they'll be more excited to read than many of them will be. The reading suggested that we get free reading time outside because boys are naturally exploratory and they're not naturally want to be confined into one room. And so like sort of that Tom and Huck type deal where we're out in the woods running the rivers, like boys just want to be outside and they want to have different things done. And so when available, I know that's a difficult thing to do in class, but they need to have male reading role models because that's not something that's very out there, not a lot of male librarians. Okay, and think about when you learn to read, who are your elementary teachers? Ladies, yeah. And so they don't have a lot of, and it's not a cool thing for a guy to do, so they need somebody to look up to do that. And then once they are successful in the reading, reading scores improved, or you see somebody, a guy reading and being interested in it, then we need to give them some affirmation for that and let them know that they're good at reading, because I like to do things that I'm good at. I don't like to do things that I'm terrible at, and I need to know that sometimes that I'm good at things, and that'll make me want to do it even more. All right. Now, one of the things that we can do here, we're going to do interventions for students from poverty. Anybody think anything else we'll move on about helping our males be able to read? Anything that you've noticed in your classroom that's helped you? I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
I just say making them read. Like I said, even see, I do oral reading in history. I make read, so we like every chapter in one section we read orally, and just now from my observations, that's surprising to me. I would not have thought that they were that, because I don't notice that obviously, but we do. I mean, because most of us don't read out loud in class. Right. We do in history for every chapter we do one section we read orally.
That might be a confidence thing. The guys are more confident to read out loud, but then they may not do as well comprehension-wise too. But yeah, that's a good idea. And then they talked about too some making designed free reading times, throughout the school. And a lot of the schools have been effective if they made it a priority, not just said, all right, you got to do it 30 minutes, but like everybody's doing it at the same time every day, and the principals are making it a big deal. On this, we're going to look at interventions for students from poverty as well, and how we can relate this to our black-white population in our school, because looking at the data, a lot of those students are from that area as well. So we can look at some of these, and it's going to be able to help us in both of those ways and try to help both of those subgroups along with celebrating some diversity later. One of the things that it said is to do some yoga type exercises. You've all heard like get up and stretch and kind of get your energy going a little bit. Well, one of the readings that we did said that the more that you did this, it increases your glucose levels, which is going to increase your energy. And some of you are saying, I don't want them increasing energy at all, but it helps their brain function overall. Another thing says that students come into school and a kid from poverty coming into school has heard hundreds of thousands of less words than a student that is coming from an affluent household. And so their vocabulary is not as big just because they have not been exposed to a lot. So we need to come up with vocabulary building exercises in the classroom and make that a priority. You can have curiosity builders, such as kind of a risk reward type thing, like in a science class. If I put these things together, what do you think would happen? And those sort of experiments, so that we can get their curiosity built up. Also, just building relationships with kids. Let them know that you care about them, so that they'll want to work harder for you. I think we've all been in that experience where we've worked harder for some teachers because they cared about us and actually looked like they gave a rip. But also getting to know them and how you can teach them best through that. You can also look at positive reinforcement and overcome their mindset. A lot of them think that they can't learn, or that they're not going to be successful, or that they're not good students, and they've heard this before, or they've heard things like, I'm not good at math. Well, if I hear that all the time, I'm going to believe it. Or I'm not an English person, I'm not a writing person. Well, we need to find ways to help them overcome that. And then finally, begin with the basics. Help them organize, study, give them study tips, having prioritize their homework stuff, and give them some key ideas. Just basic information that you think is simple about studying habits and being a good student. Sometimes those are kind of middle class rules that people in poverty don't understand. This organizational thing is not a thing because I'm in it for the now. Like, what can I do right now that is going to be fun? If I can turn in an assignment that's going to give me 100 and it's only going to take me 5 minutes to do, I might do that. But if I got to keep up with it for 3 weeks and have it organized and have to study it, then we're going to get a complete fail there. So we need to look at different ways of that. Any other interventions you can think of that have helped you with your students from poverty? I've heard of some students some teachers in our building even giving food first thing in the morning, knowing that kids got in there late and helped us, because a lot of their nutrition has a lot to do with how successful they are. That's why we've been making sure kids eat a good breakfast before testing days. The whole time we've been giving tests our whole career. All right, just a few more. Some goals we have for celebrating diversity, because we want these kids to feel like they're a part and that they're important, and that helps with building relationships. And overall, it's just going to help all of our students more. So we're going to create a climate of open discussion where students can talk openly about the things that are important to them and help them to understand, help all of our students understand that different cultures believe differently and that doesn't make them wrong. Okay? Provide students an opportunity to learn about other groups of people through the classroom curriculum. So like in your day-to-day teaching, how can we incorporate those things so that we can celebrate the diverse people we have in our school. And we possibly create a school-sponsored club for the purpose of exposing students to people different from themselves. This could mean different types of careers, different types of people. I think that we have an atmosphere that will allow for that we can bring people in to do that anytime. But I think creating a school-sponsored club could be effective. And we want to involve members of the community of varying backgrounds, and those can go hand in hand with the other. Okay? And just a couple more slides about celebrating the diversity activities. So how do we do this? We can have holiday celebrations that are important to those cultures, like Cinco de Mayo, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, International Women's Day, all these different types of diverse people that we have in the school. We can make those days be even more important, and inside of those days possibly have costume contests with important cultural time periods from those types of people, and also can bring in period type foods for those days and just make it a big deal and make their culture important. We can also add daily announcements highlighting important events and people over the intercom, just something small every day to add to and make it all seem important and make everybody understand about it. We can add culture days where each class incorporates African American, Hispanic, women's history. Where each class, where in math your word problems have to do with, African American history, or in English your readings or from those type of things. And you can spread that throughout the whole day, the artwork that you do in the art class. Speaking of that, after detailed study of each student's background, have them create some art pieces that are traditional to the country or their family's origin. And that could be an interesting art project that Ms. Abel could do. And then also we can bring in speakers to discuss the value of various types of people and how the sum of all these cultures help make America strong. Because that's the idea here. We have a melting pot, and that's why we are effective. So anybody else think anything, another way that we can celebrate diversity in our school?
I think what that class did, where they did the wax museum
Yeah.
type thing, that was really effective, and the kids that came and attended really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
They want to know why their class couldn't do something like that. So when you put that up there about the culture and dressing up and having the costumes, that was one of the things that the kids seemed to really enjoy.
So not only did that class learn, but every other class that saw them learn. That was a really good assignment. It could also be moved to where we did just you making a culture bill too. So, but yeah, all right. Well, I appreciate you guys coming this morning and listening to me. And so maybe we can look at some ways to add some of these things into our diversity plan in our school. Thank you.